It started with the smell of rosemary scones freshly baked the way Ellis used to like them, and ended with my body hitting the marble steps of my childhood home. I stood in the grand foyer of the Weiler estate, clutching the last suitcase I dared to pack. My grandfather had left this house, the company, and every cent of his $12 million inheritance to me. His will was clear, but clarity meant nothing to people who believed they could reshape the truth to fit their entitlement. Put it down. My mother snapped her stilettos, clicking across the polished floor. Genevieve Weiler hadn't touched a scone or a truth in over a decade. "You're not taking that with you. These are my personal belongings," I said quietly, fingers tightening around the handle. "This house and everything in it is contested," my father said, appearing beside her. "Until the court rules. Otherwise you have no legal standing." I should have walked away. But then Celeste descended the staircase in silk pajamas and a smug smile. "Going somewhere, Callie?" I didn't answer. I turned, stepping toward the door. "Don't you dare walk away from us, you ungrateful brat!" Genevieve screamed. Before I could respond, my father lunged. His hand fisted my hair, jerking my head back with such force. I saw white. Then everything moved too fast. I was dragged down the hallway, my heels scraping the floor until I hit the first stair. Then the second. Then all of them. I didn't cry out. Not once. They wanted drama proof. I was unstable, reactive like the fake letters their lawyer had started drafting behind closed doors. I gave them silence. Controlled, deliberate silence. The rain outside was cold and hard. My father shoved me through the front door. My suitcase followed, bursting open on impact, spilling folded sweaters and socks across the wet stone. "You are no longer welcome in this house," he said, adjusting his cufflinks. Genevieve crossed her arms. "Any attempt to return will be considered trespassing." Celeste watched from the doorway, arms draped over the railing like a queen on a balcony. I gathered my scattered clothes slowly, then stood. My scalp throbbed. My pride didn't. "You'll regret this," I said quietly. "Not today, but soon." Then I walked away from their house, away from everything toward the one person who had seen me before they taught me to disappear. Celeste always sparkled, even when she didn't try. At her 16th birthday, she unwrapped the keys to a white convertible with a red bow bigger than her sense of self. The crowd of socialites applauded. I stood in the back, holding the plastic cake knife no one had asked me to use. A week later, she crashed the car into a lamppost. My parents blamed the city's lighting. That same year, I got a prepaid gift card for straight A's. Genevieve loved calling Celeste our star. She'd say it loudly at charity galas like we all agreed. When Celeste failed biology, they hired a private tutor who charged more per hour than most teachers made in a day. When I placed first in statewide math, my father blinked at his phone and said, "Is that the one with numbers?" They didn't hate me. Not exactly. They just didn't see me. I was background to detail in their curated image of perfection. Except for him. Ellis Weiler, my grandfather, never let a moment pass without making me feel real. He lived in the East Wing, surrounded by books and leather chairs, and a stubbornness that hadn't aged. "There's my clever girl," he'd greet me. "Come tell me something new." On Saturdays, he took me sailing on the Eleanor, his aging but elegant yacht. "The sea doesn't care who your parents are," he'd say, handing me the wheel. "It only listens to competence." I learned how to read the wind, how to tack, how to hold steady when waves slapped the hull. He taught me patience, how not all progress feels like forward movement. And later, he taught me the real tides, the ones made of markets, board votes, shareholder tensions. He'd sit me beside him in his office, drawing diagrams on yellow pads, explaining mergers and ethical clauses with the same intensity he once used to teach me how to anchor safely. You think like a builder, he told me once. Your sister only knows how to shine, but the shine fades. Structure doesn't. I was 16 when he said it. I didn't know what he meant, not fully. Not until the day he called me into his study, looked me straight in the eye, and told me what he'd decided. The lawyer's voice barely filled the walnut-panelled library. Sunlight filtered through tall windows painting gold across the floor, where our family once posed for glossy magazine spreads. But there were no cameras today, just tension so thick it curled at the edges of the air. Gregory North, my grandfather's longtime attorney, cleared his throat and read to my granddaughter, Callista Weiler. I leave my controlling shares in Weiler Holdings, the estate at Grayson Hollow, and all personal possessions located therein. Silence, the kind that doesn't settle. It detonates. I felt it in the way my mother's face froze mid-smile, how her hand tightened around the stem of her water glass. My father blinked slowly once, twice, like the words needed time to hit. Celeste just stared at Gregory like she hadn't heard right. Gregory continued, tone steady. To Celeste Weiler, I leave a fixed trust of $2 million to be dispersed annually over 10 years. Celeste made a sound between a laugh and a gasp. 2 million! That's it. My mother stood. There must be a mistake. My father wouldn't. He wasn't in his right mind. He was, I said softly. You just weren't listening. My father didn't speak. He simply leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing, as if recalculating everything he'd assumed about the future. Gregory read on, but the rest blurred. Minor items, charitable donations, a painting left to an art institute. Nothing explosive, nothing that is compared to what Ellis had just done with 2 paragraphs. When it ended, no one spoke to me. They walked past me like I was a painting that had been crooked for years, and no one had bothered to fix it. Later that evening, I passed my father's study and heard whispers behind the door. She must have manipulated him, my mother hissed. She was always up there with him talking business. He wasn't stable. You saw the medication list. I'll talk to Gregory, my father said. There's still time to challenge the will. We just need the right angle. I walked away before I could hear more. Upstairs, I opened Ellis's notebook, the one he told me to keep. Inside the front cover in his neat block letters, he'd written, "If they come for you, they've already lost. Just hold the line." It started small. A hallway light left off when it had always been on. A staff member avoided my eyes. My mother's perfume lingering in the east wing where she never used to go. Then the code to my office was changed. I asked Peterson, the butler, if he knew anything. He gave a stiff smile and said, "Your father asked for additional security." Security apparently meant my name was no longer on the approved list. My laptop password failed twice before finally unlocking. When it did, several folders were missing folders Ellis had labelled transition planning and board contingencies. I checked the trash bin. Empty. The backup's gone. The hard drive logs showed a login from Gregory North's account, but no timestamp. When I confronted my father over dinner, he cut his foot with the calm precision of a surgeon. "This stress isn't good for you, Callista. You should talk to someone. Maybe Dr. Mendelssohn. Your mother found him very helpful during her adjustment. I'm not imagining this." "No one said you were?" Genevieve chimed in, stirring her soup. "But grief manifests strangely. You've been through a lot." The next morning I found my grandfather's ledger open on the kitchen counter. Its pages, always in perfect order, were torn. I asked the housekeeper if anyone had touched it. She wouldn't meet my eyes. At night I heard footsteps outside my bedroom, too slow for staff, too deliberate to ignore. When I opened the door, the hallway was always empty. I started locking my door. Then I noticed the lock had been scratched. The final straw came when I walked into the estate's legal room and found Gregory photocopying Ellis's medical records. "Just organising the file transfers," he said with a practiced smile. "They belong in my possession." He shrugged. "Your father requested copies for estate review." That evening, I returned to my room to find a small envelope on my pillow. Inside was a single folded page, a copy of a prescription note dated 2 months before Ellis's death, scribbled with vague concerns about mental fatigue. At the bottom, someone had underlined a monitor for signs of undue influence. In handwriting, that wasn't the doctor's. I sat on the edge of my bed, opened Ellis's notebook, and underlined his words. Just hold the line. I didn't realise until then how far they were willing to go. The call came mid-morning. Family meeting. Dining room. Now Peterson's voice on the intercom was clipped formal, like he'd practiced detachment. I knew before I entered the room that it wasn't a meeting. Genevieve sat at the head of the table, arms folded her pearls, sitting stiff against her throat. Roland stood beside her, not even pretending to be neutral. Celeste lounged in a chair near the window, scrolling her phone like the outcome didn't matter, because she already knew it. Gregory was there too. Briefcase closed, notepad blank. We filed a formal stay on the transfer of assets my father began. Given the circumstances surrounding Ellis's health in his final months, it's best that control remains in our hands temporarily. And the court, I asked. Genevieve smiled, sympathetic to our concerns. And until it's resolved, it's no longer appropriate for you to remain in the house. My chest tightened. You're kicking me out. You're free to go anywhere you like, Gregory said, tone soft as poison. But the estate is under protection for now. You have until this afternoon, Roland added, already done with the conversation. I went upstairs, packed quickly, only essentials. But when I tried to leave, my mother stood at the doorway of my room. You're not taking anything that doesn't belong to you, she said, eyes narrowed. These are my clothes. Everything in this house is now contested. I kept packing. She called for Roland. He didn't argue. He grabbed the suitcase handle. I held on. Then he grabbed my hair. I didn't scream, just braced as he yanked me across the floor down the stairs, my scalp-burning shoulders slamming into each step. Celeste watched silently at the front door. My mother opened it wide. Rain poured. My father shoved me outside. The suitcase flew after me, landing hard and spilling open clothes papers, a worn leather notebook, and a small gold watch. You are no longer welcome here, he said. I stood slowly, water soaking through my sleeves. My voice was clear. You'll regret this, I said, not because of the money, but because you think I won't fight. Then I picked up the pocket watch, the one Ellis always kept close, and walked into the storm. The rain didn't stop for hours. Ashley picked me up just after dark. She said nothing when she saw my bruised shoulder or the blood crusted in my hairline. She just opened the car door and kept her hand steady on the wheel all the way to her apartment. That night, curled on her sofa with a borrowed blanket, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying it. Celeste's silence, my mother's cold hands on the doorknob, my father's grip in my hair. I stared at the items I'd salvaged. My phone, the leather notebook, a crumpled blazer, and the pocket watch. It had been Ellis's favourite. He used to wind it every evening like a ritual. A good watch, he'd say, does more than tell time. It tells you when to move. Turning it in my palm, I noticed something strange. The weight. It felt uneven. I ran my thumb along the back panel and felt a faint seam. I pressed both sides in a rhythm he'd once used to open his desk drawer. 232. With a soft click, the back popped open. Inside was a tiny folded note yellowed slightly with age and a USB drive. The note read, "If they've done what I feared, go to Richard Linux in Beacon Hill. He'll know what to do." My hands shook. I booted up Ashley's laptop and opened the files on the drive. There were scans of Ellis's medical evaluations, clear, consistent, all-affirming mental clarity, audio recordings of business discussions, my voice, his strategizing mergers, dissecting board dynamics. He hadn't just taught me, he documented everything. There were spreadsheets too, ledgers tied to accounts I'd never seen. Some domestic, some offshore. One folder labelled emergency funds. CWW Ashley came in with tea. That from your grandfather? I nodded. He didn't just trust me. He knew this was coming, and he hadn't left me defenceless. The next morning, I booked a one-way ticket to Boston. Richard Lenin's office was listed on a document marked the last contingency. I sent him a single email. Ellis Weiler said you'd know what to do. CW. 3 hours later, he replied, "Come immediately. You're not alone in this." I closed the laptop and finally exhaled. There was still a war coming, but at least now I had a map. Richard Lennox greeted me with a firm handshake and a locked file cabinet full of secrets. He hadn't worked with Ellis in years, but their friendship had never waned. He came to me the day after his diagnosis, Richard said, pulling out a folder marked in my grandfather's handwriting. Said he didn't trust the family anymore except you. He introduced me to Maribel Crane, an estate litigation attorney who didn't flinch when I explained how my father had dragged me by the hair down the stairs. She only asked, "Do you have documentation?" I handed her the USB. By that night, we had a strategy. Over the following week, Richard's team sifted through account logs, emails, audio files, and board minutes. Marble filed preliminary paperwork for an emergency injunction, and I stayed quiet, tucked away in a guest room above Richard's garage, watching the whole rotten structure begin to shake. The first crack appeared in a set of payment records from Weiler Holdings. Hundreds of thousands funneled into a shell corporation, AV Solutions, disguised as a consulting firm. But AV had no real staff, no offices, no paper trail, just one beneficiary, Celeste Weiler. Marble tracked the funds. $500,000 transferred within 3 months of Ellis's death, coinciding with Celeste's sudden disappearance to Europe. But casino records from Atlantic City and Vegas told another story. She hadn't travelled abroad. She'd gambled away nearly everything. "Your sister's not just complicit," Maribel said. "She's a liability they had to cover." Next came the forged documents. A digital signature on a medical note supposedly authored by Ellis's physician. A signature verified as falsified. The file metadata revealed the document had been created on Gregory North's work laptop 2 weeks after Ellis's death. "They knew exactly what they were doing," Richard muttered. "And they're in deeper than you thought." I studied the forged letter again, tracing the lines of Ellis's name in someone else's hand. It wasn't grief that had made them cruel. It was desperation. I wasn't just an obstacle to their power. It was evidence that they had none, and that made me dangerous. The last file I opened was labelled Board Ethics, Emergency Review. Inside it were bylaws I'd never seen, revisions Ellis had made quietly. And that's when I realised they hadn't just lost their grip on the company. They'd never had it to begin with. The courtroom smelled like varnish and paper. I sat straight, hands folded, pulse steady, not from calm, but because I'd trained it to be. My parents arrived first. Genevieve wore navy pearls and the expression of a woman who still thought charm could rewrite facts. Roland flanked her like a shield. Celeste sat behind them, eyes low, lips pressed shut. They didn't look at me, not once. Maribel opened with the will, then the certified statements from Ellis's primary physician. Then came the forged medical note, digital records showing it was created after Ellis died on Gregory North's machine. The judge's brow lifted, but she said nothing yet. Then came the recordings of Ellis discussing the company with me in sharp, clear detail. In one, he said plainly, "Callista is the only one I trust with this legacy. She doesn't posture, she plans." A pause passed like a held breath. Then Peterson took the stand. "I saw Mr. Weiler dragged her by the hair," he said softly. "I should have spoken sooner, but I'm speaking now." The final blow was the video Ellis had recorded himself. In it, he looked into the camera and said, "If you're watching this, it means they tried to undo my choice. They may rewrite the paper, but they can't rewrite my intent." The silence that followed was thick and absolute. Judge Morales ruled swiftly. The will would be upheld, the assets returned, criminal referrals issued. Genevieve's jaw dropped. Roland turned red. Gregory paled. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I simply stood as the judge said my name. "Miss Weiler, you are now the sole controlling stakeholder of Weiler Holdings and rightful owner of the Grayson Hollow estate." The gavel dropped. I nodded once, and then I walked out, not alone, but finally seen. The papers were delivered the next morning. 30 days, no extensions. They could take their personal belongings, but nothing Ellis had willed to me. I returned to the estate alone, walking through rooms that once shrunk around me. Now they were mine, silent but no longer suffocating. The staff avoided my eyes, unsure where their loyalty stood. I didn't blame them. Genevieve called 3 times. I didn't answer. Roland sent a single email. "This is beneath you." I marked it unread. But Celeste, she came in person. She waited at the gates. No driver, no entourage, just a slim box in her hands. "I'm not here to ask for anything," she said. "Just to give you this." Inside the box were Ellis's cufflinks, the gold ones with the sailboat etching. "Dad sold them," she admitted. "I bought them back." I didn't thank her, but I didn't send her away either. We stood on the front steps, a long silence stretching between us. "I didn't know how to stop them," she said quietly. "I think you did," I replied. She nodded once and left without asking to come in. That night, I placed the cufflinks in Ellis's study drawer and locked the door.